The boy stopped breathing at 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday in November. His nanny heard it before the monitors did, the silence where the small, wet sound of his breathing had been. Adaize Okafor was not asleep. She had not been asleep in the nanny's quarters of the Owusu Boateng estate in cantonments since the second night she arrived there, 7 months ago, because the boy, Kofi, woke at exactly the same hour every night and would not fall back without a voice he recognized. So when the silence came, she was already sitting up. She was already moving before the monitor at the end of his bed began its sound. She lifted him. She pressed her cheek against his and breathed 2 short breaths into his mouth the way a woman in Kumasi had once shown her. A midwife named Constance, who said, "You never know when God will use what you carry." Kofi coughed. He breathed. He breathed again, and the monitor settled, and Adaize sat on the edge of his bed with the child against her chest for 41 minutes, rocking in a way that had no name in English, but had a name in Twi, the kind of rocking that says, "I am here. I am not leaving. The night is long, but I am longer than it." She did not wake the Owusu Boateng house. She did not press the emergency button beside the door that would have brought the night staff running. She sat with the boy until his breathing was as steady as the ticking of the clock above his bed, and then she laid him back on the pillow and adjusted the small lion-stuffed animal, worn almost gray from years of holding, under his right arm the way he preferred. Then she went to the window and stood there until the sky began to change color. She would not tell anyone what she had done. That was the other thing about Adaize Okafor. She did not announce herself. She was 43 years old. She stood 5'2" and weighed 107 pounds, though she had weighed 114 when she arrived at the estate in April. The difference was the food. Not that she was not fed. She was, adequately. But she sent half of what she earned, 680 cedis of the 1,200 cedis she received each month, back to her sister in Ashaiman, who was raising Adaize's daughter while Adaize worked. What she had left after rent on a room she had given up 8 months ago when she moved into the estate was not always enough to eat properly. She had not told her sister this. She sent the money every Wednesday and said she was fine. The dress she wore to work every morning was a dark blue wrap dress she had bought on Mokola Market for 45 cedis 3 years ago. She washed it in the sink each night and hung it near the window to dry. It was never wrinkled. She had learned from her mother in Enugu that a woman who takes care of her appearance when she has very little is a woman who intends to keep going, and she had absorbed this as a fact of survival rather than vanity. Her shoes were black flat sandals, resold once in 2023 at a cobbler on the Tema motorway for 12 cedis. She polished them every Sunday. She carried a small canvas bag to work each day, dark green, with a broken zipper that she had secured with a safety pin. Inside it, a small Bible her mother had pressed into her hands the morning she left Ashaiman for her first domestic position. 18 years ago, a notebook, half full, in which she kept records, dates of medications given to Kofi, times and temperatures, doctor's instructions rewritten in her own hand so she would not mistake them. A pouch with exactly 4 photographs. Her daughter at 3 years old in a yellow dress. Her daughter at 7, front tooth missing, laughing. Her daughter at 11 holding a school certificate. Her daughter at 15, which was the most recent, standing in front of a church with her hands folded like a woman who already knew something about herself. She had not seen Adwoa in 19 months. The Owusu Boateng estate was a compound of 3 buildings on a walled half-hectare in cantonments. Accra, Mr. Tobena Owusu Boateng was 57 years old, the chairman of a logistics firm that moved 34% of all commercial freight through the port of Tema. He was the kind of man whose name appeared on lists, boards of directors, philanthropic commissions, government advisory panels, but who was almost never photographed. He had not remarried since his wife Gloria died of a cerebral aneurysm when Kofi was 14 months old. He had hired 4 nannies in the 31 months since then. The first 3 had left within 6 months each. Adeze had stayed 7 months, and she was the only one Kofi had ever stopped crying for when she put him down. She had been hired by the estate manager, a man named Emmanuel, with a name tag that gave his full title as Household Operations Manager, who had met her at an agency office in East Legon and spent 11 minutes interviewing her before offering the position. He told her the salary, the hours, the expectations. He did not ask her why she had left her previous employment. He did not ask about her family. He told her the estate had procedures, that procedures were to be followed, and that Mr. Owusu Boateng was a very private man who did not interact with household staff beyond what was necessary. He said this last part, the way people say things they want heard, without being quoted. She had nodded. She had taken the position. She had come to the estate and met Kofi, who was 2 years and 4 months old, and who looked at her from behind the crib railing with the wary intelligence of a child who has already learned that most people who come do not stay. She sat on the floor beside the crib that first day and did not reach for him. She waited. After 22 minutes, Kofi put both hands through the railing and placed them on her knees. That was how it started. The thing about the Owusu Boateng estate was that everyone moved around Mr. Tobena Owusu Boateng as though he were a weather system, predictable in his routines, capable of sudden changes, best observed from a careful distance. He left the main house at 6:10 a.m. every weekday in a black Mercedes G-Wagon, driven by a man named Dubam. He returned between 8:45 and 10:30 p.m. On Saturdays he worked until noon and then shut himself in his study. On Sundays he appeared for exactly 1 hour in the garden, his wife's garden, still maintained with the same plants Gloria had selected, according to the gardener who had been with the estate for 9 years and then went back inside. He had a rule about the nanny quarters. No staff were to enter the main house east wing after 7 p.m. without being called. Adeze followed this rule. She followed all the rules. Emmanuel had a list of 34 of them, printed on 2 pages, which she had memorized in her first week. She had broken only one, tonight, in 7 months, the rule that said to press the emergency button for any medical incident involving the child. She had not pressed it. She had pressed her cheek to the boys instead. By 6 a.m. Kofi was awake and asking for his lion. By 6:15 he was eating the small breakfast Adeze prepared in the staff kitchen, soft boiled egg, bread, a half cup of warm Milo. By 6:30 the estate was waking around them, and Mr. Owusu Boateng's driver had already pulled the G-Wagon around the front. She did not see Mr. Owusu Boateng that morning. She rarely did. But Emmanuel came to the staff kitchen at 7:14 a.m. with a look on his face she had not seen before. He said the outdoor camera at Kofi's window had motion-sensitive recording. He said it had captured everything from 2:17 a.m. He said Mr. Owusu Boateng had reviewed the footage before he left. He said Mr. Owusu Boateng wanted to speak with her. Today, at noon, the thing nobody on the estate told Adeze, because nobody knew she didn't know, was that Kofi had stopped breathing before. Twice in the 8 months before she arrived. Both times the night monitor had alarmed. Both times the staff had come running. Both times an ambulance had been called, and Kofi had spent 3 days at Korlebu Teaching Hospital in Accra recovering. Both times Mr. Owusu Boateng had sat in a chair beside his son's hospital bed, without sleeping and without eating anything the nurses brought him. He had hired a specialist from Johannesburg, a pediatric pulmonologist named Dr. Ansa Pokio, who had reviewed Kofi's case and recommended a home monitoring system and a set of intervention protocols, and had written them into a 12-page document that Adeze had read so many times the pages had gone soft at the corners. She had read the document. She had memorized the intervention steps. She had not told anyone she had done this. She had simply done it, quietly, the way she did most things, because her daughter was 15 years old and deserved a mother who knew how to keep a position. If this story is already doing something to your chest, stay with me. Because what happens at noon is something no one on that estate had seen before. She wore her blue dress. She had washed her face carefully. She held her canvas bag against her side when Emmanuel led her through the main house corridor to the study, a room she had never been inside, and opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Mr. Tobena Owusu Boateng was standing with his back to her when she entered, looking out the window at the garden. He was a large man, not tall in the way that announces itself, but wide across the back in the way of a man who has carried weight for a long time without putting it down. He wore a white shirt, the sleeves rolled up, no jacket. When he turned, she saw his face clearly for the first time in 7 months. She had seen him in passing, in the driveway, through the glass panel of the front door, but never like this, in full light, in the same room. His eyes were tired in a specific way, not sleepless, something older than sleepless. He gestured toward the chair across the desk. He sat down. He looked at her for a moment without speaking. Then he said, "The camera recorded everything." She waited. "You used the 4-step intervention from the Dr. Ansa Poku protocol," he said, "the one he gave to the night nurse. How did you know that document existed?" "I found it in the medical binder," she said. "The one in the supply closet. I read it in my first week." "You memorized the intervention." "I read it several times." He looked at the desk, then back at her. "The 2 nurses before you didn't know it existed," he said. "The 3rd nanny, I gave it to her directly. She said she had read it." He stopped. "The camera showed you performing each step in correct sequence. From memory, at 2:17 in the morning." She did not say anything. "Why didn't you press the emergency button?" She thought about the answer carefully before she gave it. "The first step in the protocol is direct stimulation and breathing assistance," she said. "The button brings people running. When people run into a room in the night, Kofi wakes fully and becomes frightened. Fear increases respiratory distress. I decided the protocol came first. The button was step 7. He was still for a long time." "I see," he said. She expected him to say something about the rules, about the button, about procedure. She had already prepared herself for the possibility that she was being let go, had run the numbers in her mind during the 3 hours since Emmanuel came to the staff kitchen, 680 cedis to her sister, the room in a Shimon she would need again, the agency fee if she had to re-register, the 19 months since she had seen Adwowo. But Mr. Owusu Boateng reached across the desk and opened a folder. He turned it to face her. It was a handwritten ledger. Neat, careful columns. She recognized it. It was her ledger, the notebook from her canvas bag. She felt the blood leave her face. "Emmanuel found it beside Kofi's bed this morning," he said, not unkindly. "He brought it to me. I want you to know I understand this was private." He paused. "But I read it." She said nothing. Her hands were folded in her lap. She did not move them. He touched the edge of the notebook. 7 months of medication records. Times and temperatures. What Kofi ate, what he refused, when he laughed, when he cried, what made him laugh, what made him stop crying. He looked up. "You wrote down what made him stop crying." She breathed once. He stops crying when someone hums, she said quietly. Not sings. Hums? His mother used to hum. I found that out from the gardener in the second month. Mr. Tobena Owusu Boateng's hands came down flat on the desk. He did not speak for a while. When he did, his voice had changed in a way that had nothing to do with volume. Gloria hummed, he said, from the time she woke until the time she fell asleep. She said it was how she kept herself company. The room was very quiet. Outside the window, the gardener was on his knees in the rose bed, turning the soil. The morning was already bright and warm. The 4 photographs in this bag, Mr. Owusu Boateng said. He had not opened the bag. She had not seen him touch it. She realized Emmanuel must have described them. Your daughter. Yes, she's 15. Yes, how long since you've seen her? She could have said 19 months. She said, a while. He looked at her. He was not a man who looked away when he was thinking. He met her eyes and stayed there and thought, you send most of what I pay you back to her. It was not a question. She understood that Emmanuel had told him this too, or that he had guessed it from the ledger, where she tracked her own finances in the last 3 pages with the same precision she used for everything else. Yes, she said. Why didn't you ask for a raise? I didn't feel I'd earned one yet. He was quiet again. You saved my son's life last night, he said. The protocol saved his life, she said. Dr. Ansapoki wrote it. He almost smiled. It was not a full smile, but it was close enough that she saw it. He closed the notebook. He slid it back across the desk to her. She put it back in her bag and refastened the safety pin on the zipper. I want to ask you something, he said, and I want you to answer honestly, not the way you think I want to be answered. She waited. Has anyone in this house treated you as something less than a person? She considered the question the way she considered everything, carefully, without hurrying. Emmanuel is fair, she said. The kitchen staff are kind. He noticed what she had not included, and outside of Emmanuel and the kitchen staff, she looked at him. There is a woman who delivers the groceries on Tuesdays, she said. She looks at my sandals, and then at the house, and then at my sandals again. Something moved behind his eyes. That is not someone I employ, he said. But I understand you. He stood. She stood. He was much taller standing. I'm going to do 3 things, he said. I'm going to adjust your salary to 3,400 cedis monthly, effective immediately. He said it the way a man says things he has already decided before the conversation started. I'm going to arrange for your daughter to come to Accra. There is a secondary school in East Legon, I'm on the board, where she can enroll for the final 2 years of her secondary education, fully covered. You would be together. Adeze Okafor had not cried in front of another person in 6 years. She had cried in the bathroom twice, at night, quietly, in the 7 months she had worked in this house, but not in front of a person. She did not cry now. She pressed her hands together in her lap and breathed through it, and stayed still, because she was the kind of woman who did not perform her feelings for other people's comfort. And the third thing, he said, is that I am going to require Emmanuel to apologize to you. In person. For the way your first interview was conducted. He paused. A woman who memorizes a 12-page medical protocol in her first week because a child's life might depend on it. Who keeps 7 months of detailed health records in a private notebook no one asked her to keep. Who hums at 2:00 a.m. Because she found out a dead woman used to do it. That woman deserved a different introduction to this house. She looked at the desk. Thank you, she said. It was barely a sound. No, he said. "The gratitude is mine to give." What followed in the next weeks was not loud in the way that some endings are loud. It was quiet in the way of things that are built to last. Adese's salary was adjusted that same evening. Emmanuel delivered the new contract to her quarters in person, and the apology he gave her was stiff but genuine. The apology of a man who had been told plainly that he had done something wrong and had decided to address it, rather than resent the correction. She accepted it without making it larger than it was. Adwowo arrived in Accra on a Friday, 19 months and 11 days after Adayeze had last held her. She was taller. Her voice was different. She stood in the entrance of the staff quarters where Adayeze now had 2 rooms. An arrangement Mr. Owusu Boateng had made without being asked, by moving 2 boxes of his own storage, and looked at her mother, and then burst into tears the way only a teenager can, completely and without warning, the way a held thing releases, all at once. Adayeze held her for a long time. She hummed. Kofi's enrollment at the East Legon School began in January. His pediatric team adjusted his monitoring protocol. Dr. Ansa Pokyu, informed of what had happened in November, wrote a note to Mr. Owusu Boateng that said, among other things, the nanny's intervention saved the child's life, not because she was trained for it, but because she prepared for it without being asked. He requested permission to include the case, anonymized, in a paper on home-based pediatric emergency preparedness he was preparing for the African Journal of Pediatrics. Mr. Owusu Boateng, after asking Adayeze, granted it. The grocery delivery woman still looked at Adayeze's sandals every Tuesday, but Adayeze had bought new sandals in December. Black leather, 380 cedis from a shop on Osu Oxford Street. And the looking had changed in the way that looking changes when it no longer finds what it came for. Dexter thought giving her the minimum was giving her enough. But the minimum is exactly the calculation a person makes when they have already decided who matters and who doesn't. Adayeze had never made that calculation. She brought everything she had into a room no one thought she should be proud of, for a child no one thought she was attached to, in service of a protocol no one told her to memorize, not because she was paid to, because she understood that what is worth doing fully, or it is worth walking away from. There are people in this world who are accounted for. Their salaries are competitive. Their names appear on organizational charts. People wait for their opinions in meetings. There are other people who are not accounted for, who move through institutions carrying weight that no system measures, doing work that would collapse the institution if it stopped, invisible until the night everything depends on them. What those people carry cannot be taken, not by low wages, not by small rooms and thin walls and grocery women with appraising eyes, not by 19 months without your daughter. You can measure a person by the square footage of the room they sleep in, or by the holes in their shoes, or by the distance between where they are and where they are trying to go. And you will have measured nothing that matters, because the thing that matters is not the size of the life they've been handed. It is what they do inside it, in the middle of the night, when no one is watching. Adayeze had filled a small canvas bag with everything she needed and carried it into the house of a man who had given up on sleep, into the room of a boy who had given up on people who stay. And she had stayed. She had hummed. She had pressed her cheek to the child's face in the dark and breathed for him until he could breathe for himself. That is not a skill that belongs on a performance review. It is something older than that. It is the kind of thing that has been passed from woman to woman in Kumasi, in Enugu, in Ashaiman, at church doors and market stalls and bedsides, without ceremony and without pay. A midwife once told her, "You never know when God will use what you carry." Adayeze had not forgotten it. She had made her whole life into the proof of it. The morning after she brought Adwoa home, she stood at the window of her 2 rooms and looked at the garden. Kofi's lion was on the chair by the door. He had left it the night before, the first time he had ever let it leave his sight. Because he had pressed it into Adaize's hands and said she should keep it for safekeeping. She picked it up now. It was worn to gray. It had been held so long and so tightly that its shape had changed slightly, softened at the edges, molded to the grip of a child's hand. She set it back on the chair carefully. She was not a woman who held on to things that weren't hers, but she understood what it meant that he had given it to her. If you have ever given everything you had to a place that barely looked at you, if you have counted your own coins in the dark, learned things no one asked you to learn, loved something you were never thanked for loving, then you know what Adaize carried in that canvas bag. You know it was never just a Bible and a notebook and 4 photographs. It was proof. It was the record of a person who had not stopped. Leave your answer in the comments. I read them. I really do. If someone handed you a child to care for and said nothing else, no instructions, no thanks, no guarantee, what would you bring to that room? What would you learn without being asked? I want to know. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.